We have to have people who are trained and committed to this field of practice so that they stay and they get it. They have to understand so many more things than trial practice. They have to understand child development. They have to understand family dynamics. They have to understand issues of culture and competency. There's so much more to this than meets the eye. And our recommendation is that we start developing those career professionals and that we find ways to hold on to folks, hold on to our social workers who are overburdened with high caseloads and limited resources. How do we continue to develop a field of practice that is held in high esteem rather than, as we have seen, as we've moved around the country as part of this commission, being second-class citizens in many cases in the system of care. We can't keep that going any longer. Corvette, I really related to you as you talked, because I didn't want to be a foster mom. I had no intention of it. I had a 7-year-old daughter, and I was divorced. But there was this little girl that just kept coming into, at that time I was running a community center, and she kept coming in there. She was 11 and a half when I met her. For a year and a half, I resisted it. She lived with her father, who I learned later was showing up at home maybe once or twice a month. So this child was taking care of herself, living in an apartment, and she was always at my community center. And I just always used to say, well, gosh, where's someone? You know, other parents would come pick up their kids. I learned that her mother had died, and she was in the custody of her dad, who was an alcoholic and was not providing any supervision, any level of care. The night I decided that she had to go home with me was, I got in the habit of dropping her off at home on my way home. I dropped her at home without knowing that there was an adult there to receive her. Well, she had my home phone number. She called me because some man had broken into this little apartment. He'd come through the window. He came in apparently to rob, but there was nothing there much to take, so he didn't. And then he asked her, "What are you doing here by yourself?" And she said, "I know where my daddy is." And before he went back out the window, he didn't mess with her. He said, "You better call somebody to come and get you." She called me, and I went and got her. And like I said, she's now 44 years old. So you find yourselves in those situations. The thing that has always disturbed me, because I fortunately was not part of the system, it was a very informal relationship where we found her father within a few days, and we just made a deal. She lives with me from now on. You can see her when you want to, but she's got to be protected. So I didn't have to go through the system to do that. But it has always disturbed me that we will pay for a child to remain in foster care forever, but we won't pay for the relative or for some other person to step up that has a relationship with that child. We will go out and we will take a child out of the home because that child is medically needy and needs medicine to be refrigerated, but we won't buy mom the refrigerator. But we'll put the child into foster care with a stranger and we'll buy them the refrigerator. There's something wrong with our system. We recommend that we've had a number of years now where we have been practicing with these initiatives, trying some new things with the funding streams. It's time to stop practicing and to make them standards of practice if that's the right way to go. If we have found now that allowing us to use the dollars flexibly in this country, buy mom the refrigerator, allows children then to remain at home if they're not at any other risk of harm, then let's use the money flexibly. Let's make that the way we practice our business. Let's get away from this 4E, which really chooses to protect only a certain segment of our children, doesn't protect our children who are in tribes or in U.S. territories. They don't have the access to it. It protects a certain segment of our children, not all children. So all children apparently in this country don't have the right to be protected from abuse and neglect if you just read it that strictly. Let's not practice like that anymore. Let's break up these pilots and these other programs that are in isolated situations, and let's make them standard practice across the country. Let's be able to support when relatives and other near kin come forward to care for our children. Let's be able to support them. Let's be able to reimburse them for opening their hearts and their homes to these children so that we don't have to continue this foster care system, which is crumbling on itself because we've overloaded the system with rules, regulations, and the kinds of expectations that none of these systems can live up to. We tend to damage children with some of our well-meaning rules and regulations because we want, in most cases, to play to the auditors. We've got to turn it around. We've got to play to the kids. It's time for us to play to the kids and the families and to make them partners with us in what we're trying to do for kids. There was one thread that went through all of the stories that I heard here, and that was that thread that relates to advocacy for the families and the children who are in the system. We learned as we were traveling around the country as part of the commission that we're not doing a very good job of advocating for our families. Again, talking about how we talk to the young people and include them in the decision-making process, and how we include parents. We met with a parents group here in New York City, and one of the things I heard was a very painful story from a father who talked about not knowing what to expect and feeling disrespected by the system. And we heard that over and over again. We don't do a good job with fathers. We tend to leave them out of the loop very often because they're not in the home. We don't do as well in locating them or connecting them back to the children. And we often don't tell the families what to expect. What should they expect from the system? What's going to happen with this court process? What does it mean to be involved in the court? And what are their rights? What are their rights for visitation? What are their rights for holding on to their ability to make decisions for their children? Something as simple as, if I don't want my child to attend a certain kind of church, child's in foster care, I have that right to say so. Many of our parents don't know what their rights are, and we don't give them that information. And then to expect time frames from the system, and to know that they are going to abide by the time frames. We heard that over and over. And we have to expand the advocacy within the system for our children and our parents. So one of our recommendations, of course, was to expand CASA programs, court-appointed special advocate programs, in order to have those trained volunteers. We're not trying to overload the system with finances. Trained volunteers across the country who can speak up on behalf of the children and families within the system, and finding other ways to involve faith-based community and other neighborhood organizations in advocacy for our children and families so that they can be connected to the services that they have an entitlement to. And then making our courts responsible. That was a big recommendation for us because the real power of this system is in the court. And it's with our judicial system at the state Supreme Court level. Our Supreme Courts have to step up to this role to make sure that they are providing trained professionals, that they're monitoring the system, and that we are making sure that we have the ability to track the data so that we keep using it to get better. We found that a number of courts are still working with pen and pencil in terms of trying to maintain records of what's going on. We don't have strong automated systems within our courts. We don't have a system that allows us to place a child in another community and be able to track that child, because our systems where we do have them don't talk to each other. So we made a recommendation that we look at that and that the federal government provide the courts with the mechanism to develop systems, automated systems for tracking young people. If you put a child in foster care, Judge, you've got to know where that child is. And you've got to be able to check in on that child and monitor the case. There's an important role there, not just for placing the child and forgetting, but for really following the child through the system until that child is no longer part of the formal system. There's a great deal of power within that. So we have to have a set of goals for each court in working with its own child protection system and making sure that we're collaborating. So we made a recommendation about the judicial centers within each state, that being the Supreme Court, setting up collaboration with the child welfare system and sharing information. And no more of this, I can't tell you about this case because of confidentiality. That, like aging out of the system, is another phrase we need to begin to move out of our lingo. We have to be able to share information because these are our community's children. And that would be my last piece. That is, how do we get the community back into community service with our young people and our families? We have to stop being a closed system and be more open to others who are willing to assist and break down those silos so that we become that community that Congressman Rangel talked about. You know, we can't operate in silos. We have to be a caring community. We have to get back to being able to share information. Neighbors have to step up. Churches have to step up. Others have to be a part of raising our families, because they're not just the families or children within the system. They're the children and families within our community, our global community. We all own a piece of our families. So we would ask that we have the ability to get back to caring for one another as we did. That's my overview of the recommendations in the context of what I heard shared here today. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Helen, for laying out so well for us a blueprint for action.